Hey guys and girls, Mark here from SeaWorld Earth, and today I'm going to be showing you how to calculate your adjusted shutter speeds when you're using ND filters. Now you may remember in the last couple of videos what I have done is I've been out shooting super long exposures, and I've quickly mentioned about the fact of using an app in order to determine what our adjusted shutter speeds are going to be once we've placed an ND filter in front of our lens. Now let's dial things back to the beginning, back to basics. What is an ND filter? Okay, now an ND filter stands for neutral density filter, and what you'll find, and what they are basically, if you can imagine sunglasses for your camera. All right, and here's one, and as you can see it looks like welding glass, which to all extents and purposes that's what it is. This is an ND 10,000. Okay, now you also get NDs, they're all identified with a numerical value, and starting at the lower end like an ND2, and then all they do is they double in numerical value, so 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, so on and so forth. This one's an ND 10,000, and I do even have an ND 32,000, which is crazy. All right. Now, if you can imagine an ND filter, for example, what that's going to do is, if nothing else changes, when you place that dark piece of glass in front of your camera, it's going to obviously reduce the amount of light going into your lens. Now, if you start at the very low end of ND2, what you're basically doing is you're cutting by a factor of 2 the amount of light going into your camera, so you're halving that amount of light. So in order to compensate for that, it is equal to 1 aperture stop of light. Okay, so ND2 is equal to 1 aperture stop of light, and all you do then to calculate beyond that is every time it doubles is you then add another aperture stop to that ND filter value. Okay, so an ND4, for example, will be 2 stops, an ND8 will be 3 stops, an ND16 4 stops, 32 5 stops, 64 6 stops, and so on and so forth until you get through to the ND filter that you're using. Now in this particular case, an ND 10,000 for example is equal to about 13.5 stops of aperture light going into my camera, which means I have to have a very, very drastic offset on my shutter speed in order to counteract that reduction in light. And the reason that we adjust our shutter speed is because eventually what we want to do is we want to create that dreamy aesthetic of clouds wisping through in the sky, or even like a rough ocean that has become completely flat and calm and almost silk-like, a little bit like this shot here. Pretty cool, right? And we accomplish that by using very strong NDs in order to create super long exposures, super long shutter speeds in order to create that effect. All right. Now, some manufacturers of ND filters have actually created applications that can be used on smart devices, and I do actually happen to have one right here. This is an app, I believe, made by Leafilter. And they have a very simple to use app which I'm going to go into right now and show you on the computer screen how it is that we use this to find out what our shutter speeds are going to be. Let's skip over to this app. This is the Lee Stopper app. It's the exposure guide for calculating super long exposure shutter speeds. Okay, now what you'll see is in the top you've got the name Little Stopper. Now this particular manufacturer, they give the name Stopper to their 3 main filters. These are 6, 10 and 15 stops, the Little Stopper, the Big Stopper and the Super Stopper respectively. Okay, let's go back to the 6 stopper. What you'll find are 2 little wheels that you can then just drag up and down with your finger. I'm using just my finger on the white disc that you can see on the left hand side. Now if you look at the bottom of the screen, what you'll see is that it says normal shutter speed, and on the right hand side in green it says with the Little Stopper. Now with regards to those stoppers, the 6 stops is equal to 6, a reduction of light equal to 6 apertures. Okay, and that in ND terms is an ND64. Okay, the ND 1000 is equal to the 10 stops, and the ND 32,000 is equal to 15 stops. Right, so all you need to do is find out what is your shutter speed without using any filter in place in order to find the shutter speed that you will find on the white disc on the left hand side. Okay, so let's say for example we've metered a composition and we find our shutter speed is 1/160th of a second, as I've now got set on that white disc there. And you can see where the green disc touches exactly. That will give me a readout. If I'm using a 6-stop ND64 filter with the little stopper, it's giving me an adjusted shutter speed of 0.4 seconds. Okay, if I then go up to using a 10-stop filter, that's giving me an adjusted shutter speed of 6 seconds. And if I use a whopping ND32 or 15 stops, that's giving me a 3-minute and 20-second shutter speed. Okay, so now you can start to kind of formulate in your mind the dynamics of what is happening to anything that's moving in a shot if you have to extend the shutter speed by that amount of time. Anything that is stationary, like a rock, a building, or natural objects that are solid and fixed, they're going to be focused, they're going to be sharp, they're going to be lovely. But anything that's moving, okay, whether it's water, clouds, traffic, people, etc., anything that's moving over that time of the exposure is going to either blur or eventually disappear. All right. Now, using a super long exposure, for example, let's say, for example, let's do another calculation. Let's go back to the 6-stop. Let's say, for example, that my shutter speed, if I meter a shutter speed and it's giving me something drastic, like let's say 1/8 of a second, for example. All right, when just using a very small aperture on ISO 100, even at the beginning of a day, or even in an area that may be overshadowed or shaded, for example, like in a jungle, you're taking a photograph of a river or a waterfall that you want to really have a dramatic effect on. Let's say that our non-adjusted shutter speed is 1/8 of a second. All right. Now, with a 6-stop ND64, that shutter speed, our adjusted shutter speed, is going to be 8 seconds. But look what happens when we increase the strength of that ND filter. If we then go to a 10-stop filter, ND64, that's giving us already a 2-minute extended shutter speed in order to compensate for that reduction of light due to using a 10-stop filter in an already low light environment. All right. Now watch this. This will blow your socks off. Let's go to 15 stops. Boom. 1 hour. 1 hour and 4 minutes. Now obviously in order to set that kind of shutter speed, you need to have a bulb mode on your camera that will allow you to set the shutter speed of that adjusted time. I'm lucky to say on my camera it does, and I would imagine on most decent DSLRs, once you set your camera to bulb mode, that will then open up a feature in your menu set that will allow you to set your shutter speed on bulb timer to match the required shutter speed that you can see here. But that is just bananas. Imagine having to do a shutter of 1 hour and 4 minutes of a waterfall. It would be quite interesting to see what the effect is. But anyway, that's pretty much how you use this particular app. But as you can see, it is quite limiting with regards to the fact that it only uses, or it only accounts for the user when they are using either an ND64 6-stop, an ND 1000 for 10 stops, or a 15-stop ND 32000 filter. Okay, all very good. Using this particular app to figure out your extended shutter speed, very, very simple. But there is a downside to it. There's always a downside to everything, especially in photography. As you saw, this app only allows us to figure out the extended shutter speed based on 3 different ND strengths, and that is a 6-stop, a 10-stop, and a 15-stop. But there are all of the other stops, one through however many. So how do we figure out the shutter speed with all of those other options? Well, people brainier than me have figured out charts, many of which you can find on the internet. And what I've done is I've found the best one I could find. I've put a link to it in the description below. And all I do is I carry that around with me in my smart device. Okay, very, very simple, because you do actually have what is quite a popular filter to have these days, is what is called a variable neutral density filter. And that is one that you will screw onto the end of your lens, and then just by rotating it you can determine what strength of ND you want to set for that particular shot. And I believe most of those go between ND2 and ND10. All right, so you need to know if you've got ND2 set or 4, 6, 8, whatever set that isn't covered, excuse me, something in my eye, or a filter strength that is not covered by this app. You then have at least something on your smart device that you can just call up the image, zoom into it and take a look at it and see exactly ballpark where you should be. Now, this chart doesn't cover absolutely every incremental shutter speed, but what you can do if you're shooting on a shutter speed where that isn't on the chart, for example, all you can do is look at each of the shutter speeds that are on the chart, each side of the shutter speed that you're working on, and then you can just kind of like ballpark between the two time frames that are given for those two shutter speeds that are listed. So it's just a matter of walking into your extended shutter speed. But that is pretty much the short video for today. Very quick and easy. So all that remains, folks, is for me to wish you all the best. Please do, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell so that you'll be updated as and when new content is available here on See Wild Earth. And until that time, I will love you and leave you. Stay well, stay safe, stay sane, and above all, stay healthy. Okay, see you again, folks. Take care.